Welcome in to this edition of Blue Sky Live. Parham and Brian Rippee here with you. Got some scheduling stuff, got a busy day going, so pre-recorded on the video side. If you are watching this on YouTube, it is not a live podcast, but you are getting the video of today's podcast. If you're in podcast form, it's normal. It's what you're used to, so appreciate you hanging out with us a little bit just for timestamp purposes in case something catches on fire. It's around 8:15 on a Sunday night as we were recording this. Again, this is Monday's Blue Sky Live. Brian, kind enough to join me getting back from California, having a big weekend out on the West Coast. We'll talk about that. We'll talk some football and plenty more topics coming up here today. Podcast brought to you by Blue Sky locations all over the state of Mississippi. They're up and down I-55. They're out North Mississippi as well. Blue Sky there to take care of you. Lunch specials, $5.69, couple sides bread, any size fountain drink. Also, Sweet Daddy's locations throughout Mississippi. That's pulled pork, that's ribs, that's side items, desserts. You can even call ahead. They'll wrap it up, have it ready to go. Wet or dry ribs available, whatever you need there with Blue Sky and Sweet Daddy's all over Mississippi. All of our podcasts come to you from the Clark Ford Studio, 662-257-1900, Amory, Mississippi. Corey wants to be your car guy, wants to be your truck guy. He will take care of you. No matter where you are in the car buying process, give him a shout. Let him help you out because he's there to make a deal. So whether you want to purchase today, whether you're looking for information, give Corey a call and see what he can do for you. Again, that's 662-257-1900. And then Brian and all guests appear on the Campbell Clinic hotline. Your orthopedic needs here in Oxford, especially from a pediatric side of things. Tons of care, tons of options there with Campbell Clinic to help you out here. Again, all orthopedic needs in Oxford. They will be with us through football season and beyond. We appreciate them to this point as well. Brian, I know you're not rested. You just got back from California, I guess within the last hour or something like that. The Napa area, I believe. You know, you're a beer guy. You're not real extravagant with your alcohol for the most part. Did we do wineries? Did we do wine? Or did we stick to something that was not of the area?
No, if anything, you're underselling it. I don't drink really anything else but beer. I mean, very occasionally I'll maybe drink a vodka drink if we're out and about somewhere and I'm really feeling it, or some kind of like dessert specialty drink. No, all beer. I didn't do any wine. I tried, sips of like my wife's, but I actually got through fine. So the wedding was in Sonoma, California. I'm not really familiar with that area, like wine country area. Apparently it's kind of Sonoma County, but Napa proper is like the more famous part. I don't really know. But no wine. They did have a decent amount of local beers that were okay, so I got by just fine. Of course, the wedding had all your usual domestics. We did stop at one place. There's a lunch place that we were going to go eat the night before, and we were just in like a hoodie and like a hat, and she was wearing whatever, like jogging clothes, and we were going to go walk in to get something quick to eat. Well, they had a Michelin star slapped on the door, so we were like, okay, maybe not this place. But then someone at the initial like welcome thing for the wedding was like, no, that's kind of how it is out here. That place is casual. People treat it like a coffee shop. So we went back for lunch, and I ordered a beer there, and everything on the menu was just like fancy and designed to confuse people like me. So I got basically a beer in like a wine-sized glass, and I was like, am I supposed to drink this out of the bottle? Am I supposed to pour this like a wine glass? What the hell is going on here? Other than that, I made it by fine not drinking wine in wine country.
How many? I would love to know what percentage of tourists come into that area and don't have wine. Like, it has to be infinitesimal. I mean, just as small as possible. You're an outlier.
Yeah, I mean, if there was like a convention for dudes like that, it wouldn't fill up the hotel lobby. There'd probably be a dozen of us, maybe. I'm not even anti-wine. It's just we didn't do any like tours or anything. We weren't there long enough, and so if it's just like ordering at dinner, I know I'm like in the like spot with like some of the best wine in the world, but just I'll take a beer any day of the week.
So my camera keeps blurring out. If you're on the video side, you'll get it back in a second. I don't know why it keeps doing that. What did you order from the lunch place? What did we get at the casual Michelin star restaurant?
Some chicken cutlet dish was like one of the only things I'd ever heard of on the thing, or could like coherently understand what it was. And then my wife ordered some kind of appetizer that had some sort of fancy cream cheese and bread on it. It's weird. We just walked into a Thai place the night before, and I would 100% go with that over this supposed Michelin star place. I think there's a whole element to this food world that's similar to the art world, where if you put a bunch of fancy ingredients and make it look nice, and then the description of the meal is confusing, they're like, oh, this is just high class, when it really could just be shit mixed up together. But what
do y'all watch The Bear?
No, this has been recommended to me several times recently.
Okay.
I have not seen it though.
I was going to make a joke, so it doesn't count. Then we'll wait till you watch it and go from there. That's what I was thinking about as you were talking. You also called an A's game. You said while you're out there. I got questions, and we'll get to football, but we're just kind of hanging out. We're in this section. We're still 12 days away from the season. It is 100% as Brian, as I said on his show at the end of last week. You're just sort of waiting on things. There is no breaking news unless it's bad news at this point. There's nothing that's going to suddenly change the making of the wheel. But what is that park like at this point? I mean, they're obviously trying to move. You got the Vegas thing. You've got, I guess, who was in town? Who were they playing?
It was a Bay Bridge series.
Okay, so we get Giants A's. You at least get that. But is there any environment at all? Are their fans sarcastic? Like, what is going on in this joint for a baseball game?
I'm glad you brought this up because it was actually one of the more like oddly interesting and like gratifying sports experiences I've had as just like a casual fan going to a game. So we always thought we were going to go. We had an extra day. We always thought we'd get back closer to the airport because we flew into San Francisco, had a flight out. So there wasn't really a whole lot, I say in San Francisco, to do, but like it just fit in perfectly. It was a 4:05 first pitch local time, which got us back home in a decent amount of time. So we to go to bed early and catch the flight. So we get over there, and I didn't fully register that it was the last Bay Bridge series ever. So actually on the cab ride over there, I just happened to there's a San Francisco Chronicle on the like the floorboard of the cab. So I started reading about like Bob Melvin, who now manages the Giants, spent 11 years as the manager of the A's and actually grew up in the Bay Area. The Giants just so happened to have like 3 starters that were longtime A's. So I kind of got the background on the way over there, and we show up. The stadium is as dumpy as advertised from the outside. You get absolutely knocked down by the stench of weed, which I guess whatever, California, it doesn't bother me, but it was that you don't really get that outside of say like, I don't know, Truist Park in Atlanta as much. Everyone's tailgating it. There's probably an even amount, almost exactly even amount of Giants and A's fans. The logistical piece of it is a disaster. That stadium is a complete dump. You can't walk anywhere. It almost reminded me of like Veterans Memorial Stadium in Jackson. Like it's remarkable how old that place is. Long lines, long concessions. But we caught probably one of the last times it was full. There was a great crowd. There was a ton of people there because again, it's 2 local teams as opposed to them actively protesting their fans. So the people were tailgating it like a football game. We got to our seats. It seemed like everyone around each other knew each other. Like even you had split Giants A's groups, but it was like almost everyone knew each other, and it was just like this gigantic party. Everyone spent most of the time around us talking about how like the first time they were there, and this was either going to be the last time or they're only going one more. I went to the bathroom just to show you how old it is. It was the classic pee in the troughs, which is always a nice change up. When you don't see those too often anymore. Some dude announced in there that this was the last time he's coming in, and then said the first time he came in, he actually wasn't tall enough to make it over the trough. That's how long ago his first A's game was. And then when he left, he proclaimed that he was going to get as drunk as possible because this was his day. And we got several of those throughout the day, but it was a oddly happy and nostalgic environment with like an element of sadness too. And I really don't mean to oversell this or overplay this just because we went and just saw it, but it really was very shocking to me just listening to conversation around us of people talking about the history and how screwed up a situation it was. But at the same time, they were just so happy to be there for the finite days they had left.
That was kind of what I was wondering, if it was more sentimental as anything else. You had people that went, hey, this is the last weekend. Let's go back. Let's get it. Because, I mean, when the A's play the Mariners on a random Tuesday night, they're not drawing jack crap, and it's not whatever. But this is, I mean, there's a lot of history between those 2 clubs. And like you said, you got people who grew up in that place that, I mean, it's ending. It sucks from that standpoint. I mean, look, the A's ownership deserves it. It's been a bad situation from a tangible business standpoint. You completely get why they're doing it. But any time that any place is losing its team, like, that sucks. Like, that's tough on so many people in the heart of the community. I had stumbled on, I don't even know what the hell I was reading. I don't know how I got there, but you know how we go down these Wikipedia rabbit holes and we start clicking on other stuff and then get over to something else. I was reading about the Oilers last season in Houston, and it was very, very similar to that of, they'd been really good, and then Warren Moon left, and they're going to move to Nashville and all this stuff. And that last year, they didn't even know it was the last year. They thought there was going to be one more. But even so, they went like 2-14, and I think their largest crowd of the year was like 30,000 people. And that was at the Astrodome with obviously a football crazed state. And their last game was 15,000 people. Like nobody even went to see them off because of the betrayal of them headed out and leaving.
You can definitely get the collective sense that it kind of like rips the soul out of a community of people, because that's really like going to a sporting event in a time machine. I can't tell you how different it was walking into like the Rangers' new stadium versus, I forget, it's blanking, a Globe Life Park or whatever it's called now versus this place. I mean, this was a blue collar party. People were drinking very heavily. There's not really any luxury seating that you can see around you if you're just in the general concourse, because it gets a very old stadium to where it's like skybox or bus type thing. So it was a very blue collar party. People were definitely getting after it, and I think some of that was just rooted in this was kind of the last time. I mean, the last person I saw before we left that property, a dude walked out of the porta potty and like stood up on like a little like embankment and started yelling about how F the mayor and this is our city, and then just kind of stumbled off. That was nice. That's a nice close to the afternoon. But I'm glad I did it. It was a very cool experience. I've never really gotten around a professional sports rivalry like that. It's definitely a rivalry. I don't know if you call it friendly, but it's not like Red Sox Yankees. And then this being kind of the last time of all times was interesting to take in as an outsider.
Well, they don't even play in the same like league. So
right.
There's that too, where like it's not like, hey, we're in the same division and we're fighting it out. They just occupy the same space.
Yes, exactly. I mean, yeah, I guess you could call it friendly. It's not any sort of bitter rivalry where you're playing 18 times a year. It's more of a novelty.
Yeah, you might be the only person that's listening that would find this humorous, but it's whatever. It's our show. We do what we want to with it. One of my favorite things about that rivalry are the teams there, and I don't know, it struck me because I don't even know which team she's covering now, but y'all were in the same place as Susan Slusser. Long-time San Francisco Chronicle baseball writer, really good. She's awesome, one of the people that I really like reading, and she's done a lot of Giants, a lot of A's stuff. But there was some really good articles from a few years ago, and I don't even know his name, if that tells you anything. But, she's married to another sports writer, and they were on the same beat. And they had, like, great stories and stuff about, like, her just kicking his ass all over the beat all over those years, because they'd go to winter meetings and, like, they'd be sitting at the same hotel, like, table eating breakfast, and she'd just get up and take calls, and he's like, oh, shit, I don't know whatever that was. So, like, I'm screwed. And apparently for a long time, they were literally on the exact same beat covering the same team. And, I mean, she's one of the best in the country, and she just kicked the ever-living hell out of him.
I'm not sure I could handle that. It's not just my wife being on the same beat and kicking my ass. Just that in general. I'm not sure I could live with someone that's on covering the same beat as me. Granted, it's been a while. She's on the Giants beat now. I believe she was a longtime A's beat writer.
Okay.
Over 2 years ago. I clearly got the better end of that deal when she did switch over. But the reason I know that is she wrote one of the stories in the Chronicle that I was reading on the way over there.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so it was her and then one of their national guys, who shockingly they still have there, but I guess pretty big city. But yeah, I don't know if I could handle that. That would lead to some pretty weird fights. Like, why are you two getting divorced? Well, he scooped me one too many times, and I didn't wish you wouldn't share that. I mean, that'd be a tough way to go.
Speaking of Vegas, one of your hometown boys, you see where Gardner Minshew starting quarterback for the Raiders for this season?
I was surprised by that. They seem to like that Aiden O'Connell kid. Good for Gardner Minshew. Carved out one hell of a career in the NFL for himself.
Pro Bowler Gardner Minshew from last year.
That I hate to be down on my guy, but that when you want to devalue the Pro Bowl now, you can start throwing out names like that. In fact, this guy was once a Pro Bowler. But hey, happy for him. I hope he collects as much money as humanly possible. He's a competent quarterback in the NFL. He's on the top end of backups, I would say. So good for him.
He's so fascinating because I remember covering him and recruiting and everything else from back in the day. We'd end up at the same 7-on-7 camps. Like, he went to Tupelo all the time and played like a big 7-on-7 tournament they had there every summer and different things. And he was so dedicated to getting where he was trying to go. And I mean that from every positive way that there is. I mean, the representative that he is just for fighting for something and using the most of your abilities. Because, I mean, he goes to Northwest Mississippi Community College. He's got offers out of high school to go D1 even. I mean, go lower level, but D1 or whatever. And he ends up at Northwest. I think they win a national title for some reason during his junior college days there at Northwest. And then East Carolina. At one point, I think it was at Alabama, he was going to go walk on basically and just try to keep learning, maybe be a coach, maybe be a coordinator one day, do all these different things to go in that way. And then he obviously reinvigorates everything with Mike Leach there at Washington State. I think he set the record for most yards and completions, obviously, in that air raid system that Leach ran at Washington State. And his ability to maximize in the NFL and be a starting quarterback now at multiple teams, was a guy that did well as the Eagles backup for a couple years there and for some pretty good teams and in a franchise that's really successful. And I looked at his stats earlier, and the Pro Bowl thing is kind of a joke, and that was funny and whatnot. But he's like 59 touchdowns to 24 picks or something. I mean, like, it's completely, as you said, serviceable to solid. I mean, there are many, many, many worse quarterbacks in the NFL than Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, when he first got into the league and that Jaguar situation was so terrible, he just ended up as their de facto starter, and they were competitive in a lot of games with no talent around him. Like, I think you could pretty much immediately sense, like, all right, this guy's pretty good. I mean, I listened to, like, Bill Simmons and Sal on the Ringer Sunday, like, NFL show or whatever they do on his podcast. They had, like, a whole 1.5-year stretch where they were incredulous that no one had, like, signed him to be, like, a plug-and-play stopgap starting quarterback. They're like, what are we missing here? Like, Minshew Mania is actually pretty good. I actually covered a game of his at Northwest Community College when Courtney Cronin was still sending me on assignments to places. Don't really have a great story from it other than it was a playoff game. It was pouring down rain, and I got to the end of it trying to interview him. There's no real good place to go and cover, so we were standing on the field in the pouring rain. I didn't want to be out there, and he was just loving it. He was like, I could stand out here all day. And I'm like, you do that, man. I'm going to leave, but I appreciate the time. But
do you even remember who they played?
No, I want to say for some reason, like, East Central sticks out.
Sure.
I don't really know why. I know we went up there for a radio show one time, and I don't want to confuse it with that because that was when Buddy Stevens came and sat with us. So it was Northwest and someone else, but it was a playoff game, and that's about all I remember from it.
Buddy Stevens on McCready and Siskiyou last week, by the way, for anybody who wants to hear from Buddy. I think Thursday is the show that they had him on, so anybody can go check that out and hear from a JUCO legend, the multiple national championship winning coach there from East Mississippi, Buddy Stevens. Have you ever interviewed him?
He came, not by myself. He came, actually, that may not be true. I cover enough JUCO football. There might have been a time or two, but he came and sat in for a segment on Super Talk one time, and we were doing a live remote at a game. I don't want to misspeak, but I want to say he was like almost taking credit for diagnosing Chad Kelly with ADHD and how that turned things around. I wasn't totally on board with that take. I could be misremembering that, so please don't take that quite literally. But I remember that standing out being like, okay, Buddy's really going down this route. But seems like a nice enough guy. Was always friendly to us and always wanted to talk to us. I like him.
It's just random stuff for the start of the show here today. But my brother sent me this, and I found it really interesting a couple hours ago. Have you ever seen this graphic? It is Power 4. We'll call it Power 4 now. I think Ole Miss's associate or deputy AD, Eric Wood, said we're using A4 now for autonomous 4 for those conferences, if you just want the technical term. But Power 4 teams, stadium versus population of county. This is kind of a crazy stat. So the stadium capacity for Ole Miss, it's 64 and change, versus the population of the county that the stadium resides in. Out of all the Power 4 teams in the country, only 3 have stadiums that are bigger than the county they reside in. Mississippi has 2 of those 3 in Ole Miss and Mississippi State.
Wow, that was a real brain pretzel. That makes a ton of sense as you were talking that out. I figured nobody, like Ole Miss and State, had to be up near the top in terms of the biggest skew.
So Indiana is number 1. Indiana's stadium is 52,959. Bloomington County in Indiana is 44,167 for a population. So the stadium is 119% of the size of the county. Mississippi State is number 2. Davis Wade Stadium holds 61,337. Oxabaha County is 51,788. And then Ole Miss is number 3. Vaught Hemingway, 64,038, the official number. Lafayette County, 55,813. Michigan State is 4th, and Georgia is 5. What is interesting is, again, those three schools at the top, 119%, 118%, and 114%. Virginia Tech is number 10 on this list. It goes all the way down to 65%. So the fall off is so precipitous past the first 5-6 schools on that list as far as stadiums and population. I mean, it just underscores that, and I know people are going to bristle and start throwing pitchforks and things at the screen as I say this. As much as the guy who got Ole Miss into the SEC should be rewarded and have all the statues on campus, I think it's Hume. We've looked at this before. I've done a lot of research to try to figure out who is the one man that is the brainchild behind Ole Miss having the budget and the conference and the notoriety that it does here 100 years later. But at the same time, it just underscores still if Ole Miss and Mississippi State was one school, and frankly, given today's dynamics, how it should be one university.
Yeah, I was trying to think as you're naming other people on that list, what would even be up there. For whatever reason, Purdue stuck out in West Lafayette pretty small. I wonder if they were anywhere on that list. But yes, it does take you back in time and wonder what people are thinking and what it would be like today if there was one school. But I found that that's not a conversation that people generally have a lot.
Well, or even the other way. I think I hear this. I think I'm right on this. If I'm wrong, I'm sure there's 1,000 people who could correct me in the morning when they hear this podcast. Oxford won location on where Ole Miss was going by one vote, right? I want to say Mississippi City was number 2, and I think Oxford barely squeaked by for where the university was going to be way back in the day. I guess in the 1840s. Really? Yeah. Mississippi City on the coast, for anybody unaware.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Indiana, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Michigan State, Georgia, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Penn State, Virginia Tech. That's the top of the list.
Penn State's another one that makes sense because I always forget that Happy Valley is pretty small and actually fairly remote. I think it's pretty hard to get to as well. Okay. That's actually not shocking, but I wonder who took the time to actually make that list and bring that all to fruition. That seems like too much math for me.
What do you think the capacity is of the dead average Power 4 stadium? What do you think the capacity is? What number?
Power 4.
So those, give or take, 50, 5 schools, whatever it is.
60?
You're much closer than I am. He asked me this question a little while ago, and I guess I wasn't thinking Power 4. I was thinking FBS, so I gave a much lower number because there's obviously tons of really small stadiums. But you're kind of on it. 65,300 is your average power. So Ole Miss is actually slightly below average in the Power 4. Right at average, but about 1,000 short.
I figured they would have been right in the middle, but yeah, when you said Power 4, I did go through and kind of eliminate. Okay, we're talking ACC, SEC, Big 12, Big 10. Because if you start grouping group of 5 ones in there, but again, the group of 5 have now gotten into the Big 12 and a couple of these other. Well, not even. It's really just the Big 12. I wasn't sure how much to skew it, but yeah, that feels right. Ole Miss right around the average, slightly below. That makes sense.
It's sort of transition into this football season and Ole Miss and just sort of the landscape that things are going into right now. I saw this, and I don't want to make too much of it, but I was looking for topics, and I find the SEC, ESPN, the corporate partnership that goes on, the college football playoff, because, look, I think it's possible the ACC gets 2 teams into this 12-team playoff. I think that would make sense. The Big 12 feels pretty destined for one, barring somebody really overachieving to get a second team in there. This is going to be an SEC Big 10 party outside of that group of 5 team and all these different things. And even trying to figure out how to sort some of these teams with the different schedules they have. And I think that public perception, I think that simply the perception around programs really matters in this in a ton of different ways. And I saw this blurb this morning in one of the newsletters that I read to get thoughts and topics for the show. And it was Joe Ovies giving an opinion on Paul Feinbaum. So ESPN SEC Network host Feinbaum, as we're all well aware, he said that he gave the opinion that Florida State will finish the upcoming football season unranked. Quote, I think they used up too many tears crying about not getting in the playoffs So that might slow them down a little bit this year. Ovies, quote, "This is always going to be the issue for how fans, coaches, administrators interpret what ESPN is doing with the ACC, and it all comes down to the fact that the face of the SEC network, Paul Feinbaum, who's also positioned as a college football insider, goes out of his way to make fun of the top teams in other leagues, specifically the ACC, because he knows it gets a rise out of people." You know, Feinbaum did the thing with Lane and thought Ole Miss was going to underachieve. And look, valid opinion. I'm not really criticizing Paul's thoughts. But for a long time, Paul, you know, he was a biting writer and columnist, actually back when Neil worked with him and against him in Birmingham back in the day. But he sort of made his living for a long time defending the SEC, letting the callers call and make fools of themselves and having all the caricatures that goes along with those things. But for the most part, his SEC superiority takes were confined to the SEC just simply being better or something that was more pro-promotion of the program, especially in the SEC network era. If he's transitioning more, and I don't know the answer to this, but it feels like he's transitioning a little more to hot button of topics, opinions, trying to get a few more sound bites. Maybe they're trying to up ratings in a lot of ways. I don't know. But he is the ultimate corporate partner. If he starts really going after other conferences and going that pointed toward Florida State or toward whatever with his opinions, that is a sea change difference. Is that potentially ESPN playing to the conferences and the schools that it's actually promoting and showing? Is this do you feel like in some ways is this a organized effort to promote SEC schools to make sure the playoff maybe includes one or two more and this is just another little positive check mark in that box? Or am I overthinking it where it's simply Paul being Paul and talking about things as he would normally?
I don't think you're overthinking it, but I'm curious what the actual answer to that is, and we obviously don't have it. But I did this rant to some degree with Borky a couple of weeks ago when he was on the show, where it was right after SEC Media Days. He did the whole Lane Kiffin thing, and it was just us expressing our disgust with how ESPN covers a wildly popular sport that it has on its airwaves most fall Saturdays. And I've never understood the Feinbaum thing. I knew enough about him to know that he used to be a newspaper guy and was, like you described it, a fairly biting columnist way back when. I actually read some of his stuff about, like, I think there was a coach at Tennessee and then maybe one of the guys between Bear Bryant and whoever else. And like, if you wrote that nowadays, people would be rioting and like, it was remarkable, well written though, and it wasn't just like hot take-ish. But then I never understood the radio show. I thought the radio show was always remarkably boring, where he's either just making fun of random backwoods callers that he gets, or just denouncing anyone's chances to challenge Alabama, whoever the top-ranked team was in the league that year.
It's easy programming that the SEC-obsessed guy can just put on in the background, and it's just there.
Yeah, I mean, it would put me to sleep. I really don't understand how anyone spends any time watching that, much less listening to it. But then it's now pivoted as he's taken on a larger, more prominent role in ESPN. I mean, how he's on First Take a lot of mornings and Get Up, and their morning.
Is he really? I haven't seen this.
Yeah, he's done segments on. He's not there. He's not in studio very often as like a full-on panelist, but he's one of their segments. He's like an A or B block where they satellite in and talk about college football. And so he's just started. I mean, I'm sure that's where a couple of these takes have come from, not directly from his radio show or TV show, whatever you want to call it, if I had to guess. So I wonder if it's that, like him promoting the SEC because ESPN has the SEC now, or is his role has grown at ESPN, or he's their morning show college football correspondent? Is he just falling more in line with what they do on a daily basis, which is say the most ridiculous thing possible to get a rise out of people? I wonder which one of those two it is. It's probably a little bit of both, because where is his radio show hosted on? It's SEC Network. And so even if he's not trying to directly promote the SEC, if you're going to come up with some ridiculous hot take that's just disparaging someone else to get a action out of people, probably easier to fish in the ponds of the conferences that aren't broadcasting your show directly, even if it's not a concerted effort. I don't really get it. Again, he's gone from Mr. Vanilla to, I don't know, the Stephen A. Smith of the Southeast, if you really want to even call it that. I don't get it. I don't pay it much attention, but it is fascinating to me that you point that out for a number of different reasons. One, is it a concerted effort by ESPN to promote the SEC league that it's going to have for the foreseeable future? I tend to think it's not necessarily that because they have the NBA and the way they cover the NBA to me is fairly laughable from a television standpoint. I think it just may be the way they've decided to do television and they're just going to continue to do that. And if college football is going to be part of that mix, then by God, we're going to say in week 2 that they should fire Lincoln Riley or that Lane Kiffin's a total ass clown. That's just going to be what's going to be on TV that morning. Again, I don't get it. I think it's incredibly lazy, but clearly it works. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep doing it.
And I guess part of the reason why I'm even asking this or saying this is that, look, if Paul just simply wanted as many clicks as possible and as many sound bites as possible, he would go the other way. He said the SEC isn't good enough to get 5 teams, 4 teams, 3 teams. He just bashed the league because the league teams would be fighting back going, oh my God, no, we're the best and we're going to do this and we're going to beat our chest. When it's all at the expense of the other way, that's not necessarily getting for clicks. That's also pushing a certain promotion in that way.
That is true, but if he went the other way, do you think that would get stopped by ESPN?
That's my point. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's he's walking.
Oh no! Iowa should get in, not Tennessee. Like you're not hearing that.
Of course not, never. And so, yeah, I don't really get it. It does seem to ESPN's credit. I don't know if you noticed. I like keeping up with a lot of like the sports media movement just in general. They have hired a couple college football writers back over the last couple of years, a couple of fairly recent. So they had that initial round of layoffs about 6 years ago where they laid off a lot of their writing staff. College football, their writing staff was a victim of it. Remember, they used to have a guy or two for like every conference, and that went away. It does seem like they're slowly adding back, which I'll give them credit for because I'd much rather have them do that than just have Paul Feinbaum become SEC guy and just spew stuff on morning television 5 days a week.
Quick aside here, and anybody who doesn't have ESPN 8, they're gonna have a hard time following along, but it's okay. You'll survive for 90 seconds if you're not watching. What is the painting there, or whatever behind you? Is that the league's mascots from a certain year? What year are we going with here?
No, so this is there's actually a very interesting story behind this. One, this painting, for those who can't see, is like the most old-fashioned possible version of every SEC mascot to the point where you might not even be able to recognize some. I mean, the Colonel Reb is in actual like stars and bars gray gear. I don't know if you can see that back there. It's a painting that was given to me by a guy named Dean Stevens, and when I was a student reporter, I wrote a story on a kid named Park Stevens who was a walk-on killed in a car accident, and became very close with Robert Conyers, and Robert Conyers wore his number. So I did that story, and they had a Facebook page for a while where they would post morning motivational stuff and kind of sharing their grief of losing their son in the version of like a morning, I guess, devotion, for the lack of a better phrase. And I think I met him once or twice, and we just kind of talked on and off through the years. And
yeah, super guy. He
just sent me this painting. I just opened it up, and he was like, "I want to mail you something." I said, "Okay, here's my address." And I opened it up, and it was this painting. And my girlfriend, wife now got it framed, and it's survived about 4 or 5 moves. It's funny you quick to point that out. I'm still moving into this office, and my mother-in-law, we may have talked about this the other night, my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law, and I guess my wife took great pride in decorating this like actual office now, and they debated for quite a while if that was the best photo to have in the direct line of sight of the screen, in case people saw the Ole Miss Rebel part of it where he's in like a gray Confederate suit. I was like, I don't think with our demographic I'm going to get canceled. I think they might just appreciate the painting, but I'm glad it sticks out. So shout out to Dean Stevens out there. He's a good artist.
Is that the wildcat? What is the big black animal thing at the top?
Okay, so that's got to be the Kentucky Wildcat, because you probably can't see it, and I'm half colorblind, so I shouldn't be leading this discussion, but there's hues of blue in there.
Okay.
You've got obviously that almost looks like the Kellogg guy, but that has to be South Carolina.
It's actually the chicken. Yeah.
Well, no, we got another rooster bird down here. One of these has to be Auburn, and one of these has to be South. That's got to be South Carolina. That's got to be Auburn. The Tigers, I don't know. Take your pick. That's probably the coolest Vanderbilt's looked in a long time. He almost went half animal with the Commodore. Tennessee, I guess they're the little Admiral guy here. So it takes a while. It's almost like its own game. You got to figure out which one's which on about 5 or 6 of them. If you can't pick out the alligator in the group, you probably shouldn't be playing the game. But 5 or 6 of those, a little hard to get. But it's an interesting painting. I'll call it that.
Yeah, it has been quite a while now, but we put on a charity golf tournament to benefit the Park Stevens Scholarship Fund. When they endowed a scholarship in Park's name, they give it out every year during the spring game, and the Ole Miss course helped us. Got a lot of people helping us. I mean, it was actually the start of the what has become a great partnership with the Craddock family. It's the first time I'd really ever had any talks with Ben about anything, and I called him and I said, hey, if we put Craddock oil or put something on some T-shirts, can you help us out with the shirts for all the participants in the golf tournament? And Ben was quick to say yes, easy to say yes, and he bought all the T-shirts for the participants for the tournament. But a lot of people gave food and different things. We had a hell of a time, and gave for what it was a good chunk of money to try to help get that going, and it's still going today. They've done a great job, and yeah, Dean, just a caring, really nice guy who has tried to spread the message and the life of Park, and also help people who have dealt with similar things over the years. So I'm glad you brought him up right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Apparently a hell of a painter. That gift could have been anything. I had no clue what that was. Opened up, and I was like, man, this is really cool. So we got it framed, and it's lived with us since. So
you're probably going to start moving some stuff around. You'll come up with something else to throw around you back there as time goes on. So
yeah, maybe throw some advertising stuff back there. But I don't know. That painting now might have to be here to stay. The advertising might have to fit in around it.
Speaking of teams around the league, Neil and I talk about this a lot, that if you're just watching the game, even if you don't really care, it's not going to keep you up at night. You pick somebody you kind of want to win. Like when the ball's in the air, it's sort of like having to make a decision and you flip the coin. And when the coin's in the air, you know that one way or the other, you hope what it does. Where do you sort of fall on the league this year? Who's interesting to you? Who's not interesting? And then, I mean, not really who you're rooting for. I don't mean it like that, but just kind of where do you find, hey, there's something about them that I find compelling or interesting, or I actually wouldn't mind if they're a positive storyline as the year plays on?
I always tend to go with the zag of the guys that entered the season on the proverbial hot seat. This would obviously be Sam Pittman, and I know we talked about the misconception of what Billy Napier's situation might actually be on a previous podcast that we did earlier in the week, so I won't totally rehash that, but that's where I'd like to start, because I don't know. The Florida schedule is fascinating to me. I saw Ross Dellinger point this out the other day, and it was fresh off the podcast I did with Graham Hall, and I was like, yep, I just kind of re-cemented my thoughts. Florida's schedule is so fascinating. Let's just give them a win against Miami for the sake of the exercise. Sanford and A&M at home. No guaranteed losses there. At State, UCF at home, at Tennessee, home Kentucky. So then best case scenario, best Pollyanna thing I can give them, I guess, is 6-1. Them losing at Tennessee, I don't see them winning that, but winning their home games essentially and beating State on the road. I don't necessarily see that happening, but certainly not completely, impossible or illogical. Well, here's their closing stretch.
Yeah.
Georgia at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State.
Yeah.
That's legitimately one of the roughest 5-game stretches I've ever seen.
On paper, it is the hardest 5-game stretch in college football history, and you can't convince me of anything else.
Somebody would have to point me to a very specific example and go through lengthy details of why another one is. So what does that do to him? If they're 6-1 and he goes like 1-4 in that stretch, and they end up 7-5. Is that a bad year? What?
No, look, 1-4 is an accomplishment.
A huge one. You just got to pick off a.
It means you upset someone and actually got a notable win.
Yeah, I was about to say Florida State might be the most winnable. That it's LSU at home. I think it's Ole Miss or LSU at home, because that Florida State game. Well, I don't know what to make of Florida State yet.
It's in Tallahassee.
Right, exactly. That doesn't help. But man, you got to split one of those home games. And obviously, you got the cocktail party in Jacksonville, so that didn't count as a home game. But you don't get one of those, you're going 0-5.
It's why, to me, early in the season, Florida might be the most interesting team, because that game against Texas A&M early is just must-watch for me, because both teams need that game so badly right there. Because while you did that side of it, and look, I don't think Florida's going to fire Billy Napier. We got all this revenue sharing stuff coming up. You and I talked about this on your show last week. The buyout is huge. It's over $20 million, whatever it is. The other side of the conversation, though, is they could lose to Miami. They could lose to A&M. They could lose to Kentucky. You do that, what are you, 4-8?
Yeah, and then what do you do?
I still think he's safe, but ooh, I don't know. I mean, if you told me I had to buy or sell Arkansas or Florida relative to expectations, I would buy Arkansas.
Really?
But I think Florida's the better team. I think Florida is by far more talented. But if you told me there's some little path for respectability in the relation to what is expected, it's more likely to me that Arkansas goes 6-6 than it is that Florida went 8-4. Let's put it that way.
That's fair, but like on the flip side of that, don't you feel like they're more out on Pittman, where no one collectively feels like that's going to work, and this is just a lost year?
Neil thinks that Pittman might be out no matter what, that he's like just ready to retire and move on with his life.
It's okay. And that would make some sense. I was so the wedding I went
So
to.
if they have a hell of real quick, hold that thought. If they have a hell of a year, is there even a world where they're good on offense, Pittman steps down, and Bobby Petrino retakes the reins there in Fayetteville?
I think there's more than a world. I think that would be a very interesting possibility. That guy could coach football. I mean, you don't have to go to church with him. They'd probably prefer he go to church, but he could coach some football and could coach some offense. I definitely think that's the and I think that's possible. And I don't know. The wedding I was at over the weekend was the friend of my wife's went to Arkansas. So a lot of Arkansas people there. Some of their family friends are big Arkansas folks that I knew. And I can't remember if I read this, listened to it, or one of them told me at the thing. But he's apparently said in the past that this is his last gig, that like whenever this time comes at Arkansas, he's just going to go drink beer at his lake house on Lake Hamilton. And if that's actually true, then more power to you, man. That's great. I think he's in his early 60s. So I would buy it. A lot of coaches say that and then end up with another job. But if that's true, then awesome. So maybe Neil's theory has some credence, whether they actually hire Petrino or not. But hey, he goes 7-5. It's not a total disaster, and it's an amicable parting of ways. He goes to retire, and they get to make the change they wanted without entering like a 2-10 Chad Morris type situation.
When that's been your life for so long, I can't imagine how good that first beer tastes when you know that your money is in your bank account, you're okay financially, and no longer is that headache coming. Because look, you've got to step down in the way that would require. Even more so than like the way Jimbo got run out and all that stuff. And I think he's doing just fine now as he's been okay with his tens of millions. But for you to accept, because these guys are all wired differently. Like they're hyper competitive. They work crazy hours. I mean, they're in a world that is not normal. So for you to step away on your own accord like that, you've got to flip back a switch into being a normal person again. So for the normal person, your bank account's got millions in it, and you're no longer dealing with all the rigmarole and the headache that is college football today with the portal and the NILs and all that stuff. That's a hell of a task there, and that first beer has to taste really good when you know all that's over and you're just chilling, and maybe you throw a rod out in the water and maybe you don't today.
I'm pretty sure he's a Coors Light guy, so maybe the closest I can get to relating to coach is just I have also drank a beer at Lake Hamilton, so I can really relate to him on that front. It has to taste good, and then you just wonder, do you get bored with it? Like, I get why these coaches now just kind of sit in some of these analyst gigs for a couple of years, particularly ones that have been had large buyouts, and the most obvious one that comes up is Arnett at Ole Miss, but I'm not even talking about that. Trying to think of another one that I can't off the top of my head, but a guy who's gotten a large buyout that just does some analyst work in a cool town and just sits on his money for a couple years. I totally get that lifestyle more than ever, seeing what these guys do now. I don't know. That would be interesting. He would probably, like, his image there would take a skyrocket in popularity, I have to imagine, if they do actually go a respectable 6-6 with their schedule, which is no walk in the park. And then he just kind of says, hey, I'm out. Whoever this next guy is, you're not inheriting a mess. That would be best case scenario for everybody involved.
My cat just jumped up on my desk, and I'm trying to decide whether to try to reach over and grab him or just let him do whatever he's doing, and he'll go away on his own.
Is this peanut butter or is this that?
This is peanut.
Sad, right?
No, this is peanut butter. This is the guy that fell down the chute in the attic and had a traumatic day. had to get pulled out of the wall.
Does that kid have trauma? He might not have a pulse. That might be the coolest cat around.
He still has a little bit of an abrasion on his nose, and I think it's because when he fell, he hit the brick on the way down, and it like scratched his nose all up. So he's still got a little mark there on the side of his nose from the, 20-foot fall, something like that. I mean,
I've never been more amazed that one day we were over at your house and Carly Ann played dress up with him, and this cat just sat there and just as happy as a
he is the most chill cat ever. Like he's. I tell you what he is now is he started losing a little weight because he goes outside some. So like he didn't look like Garfield anymore because he goes out and plays all day and then like comes back in. So he's actually just a normal athletic cat. Like I called for him a couple nights ago and he jumped. Like got a normal privacy fence in our backyard. He jumped the fence to come back in the yard and come inside. And I went, yeah, you couldn't have done that 6 months ago with the way you look there, bud. So he's starting to get his athleticism back. But he's now climbed over and he's just asleep on my couch. I've got kind of a couch in my office, so he's hanging out over there now. We're all right. But yeah, anyway.
I'm not a cat guy at all, but that's one cat that might be the only cat I've encountered where I was like, that thing could live at my house. That'd be fine.
Yeah. No, he's great. And what I was going to say is you mentioned Arnett and Joe Judge, obviously, Lou Spanos, a lot of guys at Ole Miss that had a lot of big jobs. I mean, you're talking about former head coaches that, hell, Joe Judge with Giants. I mean, you got all these different things. I think it's when as we're going into this season, and it's going to sound Pollyanna and like I'm just pouring it on. And I don't really mean it like that. And we talk around this all the time. But when you look at this in the entirety and where this Ole Miss program is right now and everything about it, I mean, I came in and my first season of covering Ole Miss every single day was 2006. It was the second year of Ed Orgeron, and it was a nightmare in so many ways, and you had nothing that looked anything organizationally like a top-tier college football team. And I became pretty tight with Bruce Feldman that year because he was in town writing Meat Market, and he's willing Eddie O to just figure it out and be a normal human and them to win some games because he did understand that Ed was recruiting really well and could that talent pay off into anything. And, but he couldn't. I mean, it failed because he just couldn't have anything organizationally or he couldn't handle people. And as we get into this 2024 season, Lane Kiffin has been here 5 seasons. Number one, that off the top of its head, nobody would have said 5 seasons if they were being honest when Lane took that job and held the baby getting off the plane in the airport and the whole deal there in 2019. And this program, I've never covered a season that 9-3 is potentially a failure, that it's 10-2 or better. They're coming off this 11-win season, but not just coming off an 11-win season, coming off double-digit wins 2 of the last 3 years. That's even more relevant. That is something that is pretty rarefied air in college football, period, in a major conference. And then the way they have been able to mold the collective and the NIL into something that works for them, and then get the staff that they have. They've been able to really put smart people together, and they get Pete Golding, no matter what all the reasons were. At the end of the day, you got the guy who was running Alabama's defense in the previous job to come and run defense for you, and Pete's done a hell of a job in that way. But for coaches who are either spending a season rehabilitating, spending a season to learn something, or just simply finding what the next job is in their craft, for them to pick Ole Miss is really fascinating. Zach Arnett was an SEC head football coach. He was at Mississippi State as a head coach. Joe Judge has been at the top of the pinnacle of the sport in a lot of ways, and they're spending a season here with the Rebels. And the trust in Ole Miss to do that if you're them, and then, frankly, the maturity that it shows from Lane Kiffin. That, he's able to say, hey, I just want smart guys around me, and we're going to bring in all these opinions, and we're going to make this into whatever we can do to win games. Because what Lane Kiffin has become, and we talked about this, is just a guy that makes decisions based off, does that help me win or does it not? And we are just trying to win, period. That's all that really matters. And to be a place where those type of coaches come and hang out for a season or however long this ends up being, that probably says more about where your program is developmentally, even from an organizational standpoint, from the ability to maximize those staff positions, than maybe anything else. Like, I just look at the totality of this, and I mean this in positive light, in the best possible way. I don't recognize it. And I don't recognize it in a way because of how far it's come and even how it's bled over into anything else. You know, you've got Walker and Liston and the collective and what they've been able to do, and they were at the forefront, and they made so many right decisions early with William. But they also have been flexible. They've talked to the legislature, and they've done all these different things, and they've done all these different routes to stay as ahead as possible. You know, the foundation had a big, not fundraiser, but a big meet and greet kind of social thing, trying to drum up extra people and support on Friday. They're just moving in the right direction in a way that I'm not sure, we always talk about it, but I'm not sure we fully appreciate the totality of the picture without really almost writing it down and making a list, because it's just a completely different world than most of my nearly 20 years on the beat at this point.
Yeah, it is. And I think the difference is that the other time in my lifetime where this was the case, whether it be the one brief period with Nutt or the whole Hugh Freeze experience, is that everything else behind the scenes that you were talking about, the decision-making, you know, bringing in analysts, a wide range of opinions, just that wasn't there. That piece of it, maybe the term is infrastructure, was not there around it. And now you just kind of expect Ole Miss to operate like a big boy football program and make sound decisions. And you're right, it's pretty unprecedented in that sense, and it's going to make for a fascinating fall. But yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the things he learned from Nick Saban. I mean, I know that gets talked about over and over again. It's just become a really kind of a nauseating talking point. But like, what did Saban do? He brought in former head coaches. His was more like a very, not obvious, but more open, like rehabilitation tour, where Lane just feels like he's doing a light version of that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's fascinating, and it's crazy to see the unison with which all facets of this that go into having a successful college football program in this crazy time is, whether it's the administration, the collective, the coaching staff, the off-field staff, all of those things pulling in the same direction and making decisions that are, this is going to help us win football games or is it not? And doing everything possible is remarkable. I mean, it's as again, this Ole Miss kind of found its like golden era of football in a time where it's just like this lawlessness, and maybe there's some reason for that, or some poeticness around that. But yeah, it is, and it's going to be an interesting season, because I hate to be this guy, but like, what does this look like if it doesn't go well? What if, like, I know 9-3 is not like disaster, but it would be a disappointing. What does it look like from there? I think you'll learn a lot about the stability of the program, whether it's Lane Kiffin leading it or someone else. And I'm not going down the road of even insinuating that he's leaving, but what happens 2 years from now? I guess now that I'm thinking about it out loud, it's like, whether this goes well or not, actually, what does this look like in 2 years? Like, you've kind of reached this. How can you elongate this period? Maybe using this year as a failure is a bad hypothetical example. What does this look like next year regardless? Can they maintain this? And so, all signs point to them being able to do it in some sense. Will they have the exact same year every year? I mean, no, but it seems like they're more set up for long-term success no matter what happens than they have at any time since I've had conscious memories of the program. Maybe that's what I'm trying to get out of all this.
You took the words out of my mouth. I think that there's one step remaining in the maturation and the progression of the program. And yeah, it's not winning, because I think people trust Lane Kiffin as a coach on game days to try to maximize his program. And look, seasons are hard. Winning championships, getting to the playoff, it's tough. Injuries happen. Things happen all the time that prevent a team from maximizing its potential. That's not the goal. The goal, in the essence that we're talking about with one step remaining, is to make it where it is a perennial situation of every year you have the ability to potentially get there. And you have the potential to make the playoff and compete for a title and all those kind of things. So yeah, it's about next year. It's about how do you replace, what's the structure of place like that? What does it look like from donor fatigue and fun, getting money in for the NIL to what's necessary? It's what does it look like between the collective and the foundation and the athletic department as far as how they all three operate some symbiotically to make that happen in those ways. And that's what we don't know, because you look at this roster and forget the Last Dance stuff. That's a marketing thing and whatnot. That's fine. But there's a lot of guys that are gone. A lot of guys. You're going to need money. You're going to need NIL. You're going to need portal. You're going to need transfers. it's not impossible that you go get a quarterback. I mean, that's not anything negative against Walker Howard or Austin Simmons. Just in general, big time programs sometimes go get quarterbacks when they lose the guy they currently have. So it's all those things, and then it's development. It's, hey, I told somebody today, I was at the pool today, kind of hanging out with my kid, and I told a buddy, I said, what you need to happen this season is by the middle of the second half of the year, 10 guys who we're not talking about right now, or at least not talking about in any major way, they don't have to be stars of the program this year. But you got to look up and go, hey, next year they're coming. That's going to be dudes that I really like. That's going to happen. Kind of like we're doing right now with TJ Daugherty or whomever. There's dudes who last year flashed a little bit. We went, hey, they're going to be all right. Like, there's something coming there. Bryson Sanders, a guy we really like, that think down the road he's going to be a good offensive lineman in this league. Dudes where either they're taking steps or those steps are coming and they become the next set of household names. I think Jamarius Brown's been really good. What's Cam Franklin look like in a year 2 versus a year 1? There's a developmental piece to this that is just as necessary, because you can't go buy 40 dudes. It's impossible. It's not going to work in all these ways. So I want to see what the downstream effects of roster building are for this team moving into next year. The thing that killed Ole Miss baseball. They simply didn't do it. They did not develop and manage their current roster, which put too much pressure on the portal. Football doing the opposite and making sure there are guys that are ready to kind of step in an old school way. That's going to tell where this program is moving forward to 2025.
And winning makes all that easier too. So that's going to be a huge component of it as well. I mean, stating the obvious there, but you're exactly right. Like, who do you kind of look at this year, and with as much as they lose next year, who do you kind of point to of like, okay, they have a foundation to build around this year? Because again, baseball kind of proved, hey, if you don't really have the foundation, it doesn't really matter what you add in the portal, and you just bring in talent for the sake of bringing talent, and it's a team and a roster that doesn't make sense. That doesn't really work well. But I think Ole Miss has had the benefit of having one of, if not the coach that is single-handedly been the most advanced on the portal, leaned on it the most, however you want to term it. But Lane Kiffin knows the ins and outs of the portal. If there's someone who could teach a college class on how to utilize the transfer portal to a roster building advantage, it's probably Lane Kiffin. So yeah, they're in as good a position as they've ever been, and it's like you said, it's surprising in my sense, but I'm losing the surprise aspect of it and more so drifting toward what you said, where it's like this doesn't even really resemble anything I'm used to.
Lane Kiffin, would he rather teach a class on something or go mingle in a room with 300 people?
Teach a class, because I think a weekend he'd be like, hey, this is Zoom and attendance is not required. I'm
going to just talk into my screen here and y'all do whatever it is y'all do at this point. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I think a room with 300 people, he'd be stuck, and I don't think he'd be able to be there. So I'm going to go with the class, because at least he's the one talking. And yeah, he doesn't have to mingle.
When I was at ICC, I did take a class called Baseball Theory.
Really?
Yeah, they literally taught the game of baseball. Uh-huh.
The only theoretical class I took at all is I took some sort of philosophy, like literally philosophy 101. I can't decide if it's my fault or the professor's fault. We'll leave that up to the people. But I went to class, took the first test, and made like a 30 on like a 100 scale, and was like, I can't do this, and dropped it.
Oh, you dropped it?
It was such just a mind pretzel. I was just like, I can't do this. There's no way I'm going to be able to pass this class. I think I even went to the professor, and he was like, yeah, you're hopeless, man. I dropped this. So, yeah, I didn't take many theory classes.
Do you find Missouri or Tennessee more interesting this season?
I think probably Missouri, just because expectation and being in the second year of that. They're kind of where Ole Miss has been the last year or two, right? They finally got to that 10-win level, and can they sustain it? They bring a lot back. I find them more interesting, I think, than Tennessee, just because, I don't know. I mean, in some ways, Tennessee might be more interesting because they have more question marks, I think. But I just find the Missouri story more compelling because, I don't know, if Missouri doesn't make the playoff this year or Tennessee doesn't make the playoff, one of those two doesn't happen, which fan base is more disappointed? As crazy it is to say, I think it's probably Missouri. So that's why I probably find them more fascinating.
Tennessee has become interesting as an athletic department to me because I think there's an argument to be made that they're the number one overall SEC athletic department right now. They invest in everything. They're good at everything. They've really, really, really done a good job of maximizing those things. A&M has put a lot into all their sports too. They've been dominant at women's tennis and things like that. Missouri is yes. There's a lot of ways in their own way that they're kind of the East version of Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss has a much higher ceiling program wise, but Missouri legislatively through the Missouri legislature jumped on NIL almost as quick as Ole Miss did, maybe faster from a legislature standpoint, and they're like take no prisoners. Like if there's a possible law those cats can pass that helps them in the NIL space, they do anything. Like there's the argument made right now that they are already at a point where the athletic budget is essentially paying NIL because of the way they have the partnerships set in Missouri for those type of things. And whereas most boards and most schools have at least some hesitancy, it doesn't seem like Missouri does. It seems like if they could even make the argument that it falls under the scope or the purview of being legal, they're all in on it. And in some ways, I almost admire it. Like I'm not really pulling for Missouri this season, but at the same time, I kind of look up and go, hey, what the hell? Let's just take a shot and see what happens.
I admire the hell out of just the ingenuity and the forward thinking just in general, but I wonder what it's rooted in. Because, I mean, I think I've told this story before, but, I mean, you have a similar experience, I'm sure. That's the one, whenever you talk about what's the one fan base that doesn't seem like it fits. And, like, the example I had was 2019, whenever I think it was Luke's last team went up there with the whole Rich Shot experiment. I didn't get my credential in time, so I had to go to their old basketball arena. Basically, to go get my credential, I had to go walk through the middle of their tailgate section, and everyone was watching the Cardinals baseball playoff game. Like it did not feel like an SEC tailgate at all. I mean, everyone was glued to those televisions, and so, I mean, of course, obviously, it's them wanting to win and using loss to their advantage. But do you think that's really rooted in just a sheer desire to become a power in football? Maybe it is, but what a surprising place for that to happen at.
Some of it, I think, is a benefit of being the only school in the state that's in a power league. I mean, like you've got so much, maximization when it comes to that. And then you don't know. I mean, that's what I don't know the answer. I mean, I really meant it when I'm just kind of curious what has been their engine. It's possible there's about 2 or 3 donors that just went, hey, you know what? By God, nope. We're going to talk to the right senators and the right House people, and we're gonna make this happen and push it through, because it does take an administration that cares and at least goes, nope, like we're going to try to see where this goes, and if we screw it up, then what do we have to lose? It makes sense.
You'd think one of their esteemed journalism alums would have already dove into this, but we haven't had that happen yet. Hell, they might take credit for it if they can. But anyway, yeah, I'd be interested to learn the actual source of that.
Last thing, you buy or selling on A&M to win 8 games?
We'll look at the schedule real quick. I like Mike Elko. I assume there's still a decent amount of talent there without even really diving too terribly deep in the roster.
There's the argument that A&M is a fringe playoff team.
I could see that.
They're talented. Wegman's not bad.
What is Wegman's ceiling? I know he's a high-rated kid, but I just haven't seen enough. And granted, I didn't really watch a ton of A&M in the second half of the year last year. So this is the week I plan to go into the teams that Ole Miss doesn't play and kind of do the same thing I did for the podcast of the teams they do play. But just looking at it on the surface real quick here, I could see it. What a hell of a start to the year. Wait, do I have this right? No, I've just put up their baseball schedule. You get Notre Dame in week 1, do they not?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so that's a hell of a start.
Because that's my hot take. If Notre Dame wins that game, I want stock on Riley Leonard winning the Heisman Trophy.
And Notre Dame basically just waltzing into the playoff based off the rest of their schedule.
Yes.
I could see that. Pretty manageable schedule. They get their wish and get Texas back every year. LSU at home, State on the road. I can buy into that. I'll give them 8-4 with a outside chance to make the playoff. I could see that. It wouldn't be totally crazy.
I think it is very possible they win that finale and pop Texas's bubble.
Ooh, that's a good one. Where is that? That game's in College Station, isn't it?
It is.
That'll be a good one. We're getting, as much as people, and myself included, have kind of bemoaned losing the regional rivalries, we're getting some awesome games back, too. Some senses comes both ways. We're getting, obviously this came back, but even some of the more awesome ones that don't make sense, like sign me up for Penn State USC or Ohio State Oregon. It's not the perfect world we grew up in college football, but you're getting some banger matchups that I'm not sure we would have gotten without this realignment.
And because of the playoff, we have so many more regular season games that matter, either primarily or on the fringe in some way. We're like even in week 1 or 2, there are going to be games that we identify and go, "Hey, that game really is going to matter in November." It's not killing the regular season; it's making it better.
It is undoubtedly making it better, and I don't really get the arguments to the contrary, even though I don't love everything that's happened with the way realignment's gone down. I think there's room for two things to be true at one time, but and maybe it's just because I'm excited about football in general, but I feel like every year I kind of I love looking at the ESPN week-by-week schedule, seeing the games.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've identified more games on a weekly basis this year. I'm like, yeah, I have to be in front of the TV for that than I have in years past. But again,
this might be a coincidence, but it seems like late in the year, especially, the SEC and Big Ten almost gave each other the week. Like, there's not a ton of weeks where they completely match up head-to-head where you go, oh, my God, oh, my God, oh, my God. It's kind of like the Big Ten has a big week and then the SEC has a big week. That week that Ole Miss plays LSU is the one banger where there's just stuff all over the board and every league has a game. Like, that is a tremendous schedule that week.
Off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure that's Oregon, Ohio State, too, is it not?
It's that. I think it's like Penn State, SC. I think it's Oklahoma, Texas.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like there's like 5, 6, 7 just absolute like stars in there that week.
That's a hell of an excuse to get in front of a TV. Maybe all the evidence we needed of having better matchups on a weekly basis of the little internet I consumed this week. It seemed like the fall weddings debate was back. Maybe if that's what sparked it, we do have more good games than ever. So, yeah, I'm excited for it. I think we'll have less dud weeks, and I think overall from a television product, which is what everything this sport is gravitating toward. How do we make this more compelling, make more money, and how is it more compelling television product? Probably not a surprise that we're getting better matchups on a weekly basis.
It is an entertainment product, and let's just be completely honest. For the sport to survive, the TV networks have to make a ton of money and still want the rights. Because otherwise, all the budgets fall, and we're in a completely different situation all the way across the stratosphere at that point. So everybody needs you to be on the same page and for it to be a huge popularity and entertainment product, and it go from there. That's the only thing this works is we are currently envisioning it and living it at the same time as well. So, all right, we will wrap there. Brian Rippee, kind enough to join me here tonight after his travels. Hope all of you guys enjoyed. Back with a normal schedule on Tuesday morning. Quick little bit of an FYI for you guys. They switched the Monday practice schedule, so there is no availability for us to watch practice on Monday. It is just a walkthrough. So we have interviews, Lane Kiffin available around 11:45, noon, something like that. So coverage of that at rebelgrove.com. But there will be no ability to call, roll, or get those 15 minutes of individual drills on Monday. As of now, the schedule calling for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday practice, and then nothing else until we get into game week the following Monday for the Furman Paladins coming to Oxford for the season opener of the 2024 season, a night game for the opener there with Ole Miss and Furman. So rebelgrove.com in the meantime, and we will talk to you on Tuesday.